Thank you, Gene. I'm sure Doug will be around, and I hope you will be too. Our next speaker is political scientist Jack Knight, who I'm tempted to say is returning to the scene of the crime from Duke after a long and distinguished stay here at Washington University.
I think you've all had the experience that I'm feeling right now. You're at a conference and you think of something that you want to say after a talk, so you raise your hand, and then a couple of minutes later the moderator tells you you're number 20 in the queue. And so by the time it gets to you, you can't decide whether you're going to say what you were going to say or just vote on the quality of the previous comment in a certain way. So I decided, I've got notes here, so I'll go ahead and use them, but it will be somewhat like voting on some prior things that were said. In 1985, I was at the University of Chicago in graduate school trying to figure out what I was going to write a dissertation on. So I decided I was going to write a dissertation on competing theories of institutional change. One of my advisors, Adam Jaworski, when I told him that's what I was going to do, said, "You're kidding." And I said, "No, I'm going to do this thing on theories of institutional change." He says, "Nobody cares about institutions." I said, "Well, I think some people did." No, he says, "Institutions don't matter. We know that now." Talcott Parsons was the last person that said anything serious about institutions. And I'm telling you, don't write that dissertation. And I said, "Well, I'm going to anyway." And he said, "Yeah, I fear it's going to ruin your career if you write that dissertation." Well, how's that working out for you now, Adam? Right. So that's I wrote the dissertation. And Doug's work was one of the main focus of the book. And I'd said a number of critical things in the dissertation about his account. So I get to WashU, and fairly early on in my first semester here, he comes into my office one day. I'd never met him before. And he introduced himself, and we talked for a minute, and he said, "I've been told that you and we could probably learn something from each other if we talked." I went, "Oh, okay." So I said, "Let's talk." And we did. We started a conversation that's gone on to this day. And it's been very productive and enjoyable for me, and I hope for him too. That began a relationship which usually took the following form. There was always somebody else on campus that he wanted to go talk to. So he would often kind of take me along for those sort of lunches or conversations. I couldn't tell whether I was supposed to have an important role there or just to be sort of the social buffer, you know, how sometimes that is. And so one year it was Andy Clark, another year on cognition, another year it would be Pascal Boyer on anthropology, several others, and that sort of thing. And always it would be sort of the discussion of, let's go talk to this person and find out what we can learn about what they do for what we might be interested in. And through those various discussions and through all those experiences, I learned a lot of things. There are three features of that relationship that I want to emphasize, though, that I think are important for terms of thinking about the social sciences. The first is the idea of interdisciplinarity. Now, there's a mantra on university campuses about interdisciplinarity. And we all hear it, we value it, it's supposed to be important, and that sort of thing. But what it usually means is a group of people from various disciplines will get into a room and they will talk to each other and they will talk about how they do their work and how other people do their work, and then they go back to their offices and they do it exactly the same way as they did before. So it's a lot of talk, and so that's really sort of multidisciplinary. A lot of people get together, but there's no real exchange, there's no real engagement. One of the things that I think Doug taught me and taught many of us is that there's a way to do interdisciplinarity right, which is to engage the other discipline, try to understand not only what they're saying, but how they went about arriving at those conclusions. And then see what it is about those other disciplines that can inform my work, and how it can be changed, how it can be, the story can be advanced, the argument can be advanced by really focusing on it in that kind of way. So one of the things that I think I want to emphasize is Doug has always been an exemplar of interdisciplinarity. He's the person that I point to when people ask me about that kind of work, but it's a rigorous interdisciplinarity. It's not anything goes, that there are no standards. It's grounded in a particular discipline, which provides a framework for understanding how the other disciplines can come into play. So I think rigorous interdisciplinarity is one of the features that I think is the highlight of Doug's research. The second is humility. Doug, North, and humble in the same sentence. Google that. I Google that and see it. If I see it again. But I thought I'd use it. I figured you might be fading on me then, so I thought maybe there's something I want to hear about this. It's a very particular sort of a point I want to make about humility, which is
we hope so.
Yes, I'm a pragmatist by nature, and so and from a philosophical perspective, it's a particular theory of thinking about knowledge and beliefs. And one of the important tenets of pragmatism is the idea of fallibilism, that we're all fallible in a certain way. And it really means that even the ideas or beliefs that you take to be most important may be wrong. And what that recommends is, and several early pragmatists, Charles Peirce comes to mind, several early pragmatists really emphasize that there are implications for how you should organize your life based on this particular idea. And it's given the fallibilistic nature of our beliefs, then we should organize our affairs in such a way to constantly be challenged, constantly have to reinforce the things that we believe, to test them to see if they're still true or not, or whether they've changed in a particular kind of way and we need to rethink them. Now, and so one of the things another thing, an important characteristic of Doug's work, I think, is he has done that. He's organized his own research and his intellectual affairs to constantly be challenged, to constantly open it up to new ways of people rethinking or reassessing what he believes and what the people around him believe. Now, the humility of this is, given that it suggests a certain perspective about the social sciences, which is, if you believe in this idea of fallibilism and the importance of the challenges, then it suggests that we adopt in a certain way a certain perspective of humility in our interaction with others in terms of their ideas or beliefs and in terms of that engagement. So it's in that sense that I want to suggest that the idea of sort of intellectual humility has been another feature that, of Doug's work that I've learned from. Now finally, the third thing I want to talk about is generosity. Now a lot of people have talked about generosity, and a lot of people have talked about what a great guy Doug is. Doug is not Mother Teresa. That was a different Nobel Prize winner. It was not Doug. Let me tell you a story. Lee talked about this yesterday, I think, about Doug's open door policy. Right? The door is always open. You can come in. You can always come in and talk to him, this sort of thing. And the door is always open. Well, early in the time that I came to WashU, I would sometimes go by his office right down the hall from mine, and I would go in and I would look, and I would see that somebody was in there with him. And if you'll note, the way he organized his office, he had his desk here and his chair, and the chair that the person that normally was in the room was on a direct line to that door. Okay, so he could be looking at the person and looking into the hallway at the same time. So I would come in, and if there was somebody sitting there, sometimes he would just ignore me. Sometimes he would say, "Oh, hi, Jack," and but I would kind of go away. One particular day I did that, and he came to my office a little bit later, and he said, "Where the hell did you go?" I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Didn't you see that look I gave you?" I said, "Yeah, I saw the look you gave me. I thought it was go away." He said, "No, it was get me out of here." Come on!
It's not on me.
Oh, I'm not going to tell you who it was. But you've all been in that chair at one point or another. So it's not complete. In fact, I believe there's a few times where I really do believe we'd be having lunch and he'd have an appointment in the afternoon and he would say, "I've got an appointment at 2 o'clock. Around 2:45, come by my office and say, you've got to talk to me now." In terms of that. But despite that, he is very generous in one important way that I want to end by emphasizing. He's generous in terms of the way he deals with other people's research. The philosopher Donald Davidson has this concept, the idea, and many people have used it, but Davidson emphasized it, the idea of the principle of charity. The idea being when you're looking at somebody else's argument or somebody else's research, try to reconstruct it in the best possible way to assume that they have something important to say. And so that you reconstruct the argument, give it its best, give it the best test that it can, the best chance articulation, and then go at it. Then take it on. So do it that way. So in a certain sense, the intellectual generosity involves taking other people's research seriously. Don't just immediately discount it. Try to figure out what the important thing to say is, and then go from there. I think that's another thing that's characterized Doug's work through the years, And another one of the lessons that I've learned from him.
Thank you, Jack.